Hello, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining us here live in the studio. We have another action-packed hour. I'm looking so forward to this. Not only do I have Professor Alan Barrell alongside me this afternoon, many of you will recognise Professor Alan Barrell. We'll hear a bit more from Alan in a moment from some of our previous shows, Show Me the Money, and also where we kicked off our very first one of these back in December last year, all about AI. But today we are joined by Henry O'Farrell, which we will introduce to you very, very shortly and find out more about Henry, his journey, and lots of exciting things to explore. Do remember, if you're watching this live with us this afternoon, maybe you're watching it because you signed up to be here, you will get a copy of the recording after this afternoon's event. 5 or 10 minutes. Once we finish the live webinar, you will receive a copy in your inbox. If you're watching this on LinkedIn or on YouTube, they will remain there, so you can always jump back in at any time and enjoy the show all over again. If you've missed one of those golden nugget moments, you can revisit it, recall it, and relive it. Do use the chat functionality. It's there for you to communicate with us and for us to pick up your exciting questions that we can ask to Henry this afternoon. I can see we've got people from Beijing joining us, and also coming from Cambridge. No surprises there as well. So thank you very much wherever you are in the world joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here this evening. I'm going to hand over to Alan. Alan, thank you very much for joining me again here. Another exciting show. What's happening? Because I know you're in Cambridge. What's happening in sunny-ish Cambridge this afternoon?
Yeah, thank you so much, David, and thank you for all the work you do to make these broadcasts possible and your expertise in doing it so well. And David and I started this series, as he said, in December, as a kind of something that grew out of a series of 10 years ago. We started a series of venture camps in Latvia, going to Latvia, finding entrepreneurs, bringing them to Cambridge. And we have done that annually ever since. But in between times, we felt we should do more. So from the Cambridge Latvia Venture Camp grew the idea of a webinar series for the Latvian people. And then why not make it much more international? So we've got certainly people here today from China that are with us. I think probably there are some from Finland and other countries and around the world. And I'm so pleased today that we're actually bridging the generation gap. These are your webinars, so please join in. Please ask your questions. Please interject. We're not here to lecture, but I'm very proud to be here today as the grandfather of your speaker, Henry. He's my eldest grandson. He lives around the corner from me. I see a lot of him. He's got an exciting story to tell you. And I hope you will be able to relate your life's journey and your life's experience and your hopes and dreams to what Henry is going to tell you. He's not telling you his story in a boastful way. He's being very honest, and he's telling you that he's come to a particular point in life where he wants to do something different. And he knows that in order to do it, he really has to think about how he presents himself and what his identity seems like to other people. And I'm also proud that his other grandfather is watching and listening today, and he might chip in a little bit later on. So Henry, in a way, this is a family affair, but we're all part of a big family. We're all part of the world's family. And I believe in a world without borders, as everyone that knows me knows. It's what I preach to all my students and all of the people who will listen to me. The politicians will never create the kind of world without borders that we're going to enjoy this afternoon just by relating to each other in a very honest way. So I'm going to hand over to Henry just to get things started. Henry, kick off the meeting for us, and then we'll have an open discussion. And he's got a few thoughts that he's carefully put together here to get the discussion going and make it exciting. So Henry, it's yours.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And David, thank you for the intro. Alan, I love working with you, Alan. Me and Alan, or me and Grandad, I never know what to call him when I'm out in public. We do a lot together. So it's a pleasure to be working together. on this. And it's also great in the comments to be seeing where all of you guys are from. I see a comment from Beijing, from Latvia. So if you can post in the comments where you're from, I'd love to see all the countries that you guys are tuning in from. As Alan says, it's a global community. It's a global family, right? So David, I've got some slides. Would you mind just popping them up? I want to give you guys a quick intro into who I am briefly, and then I'm probably going to talk a little bit about a lot of things. And maybe, as David mentioned, hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully, I'll give you some golden nuggets to take away. That would be ideal.
And he is interruptible. If you have an urgent point, shout, come forth and say it. Okay.
Whether I like it or not, you guys feel free to interrupt me. All good. And it's good to meet you guys. That's what the purpose of this slide is. It's good to meet you. It's good to be here with you. Thank you for tuning in. It's pretty cool that you guys are here to listen to what I have to say. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background as to who I am, which I think will help set the scene for the personal journey I'm going to try and take you guys on a little bit. So as Alan and David said, as you can see on the screen, I'm Henry, and I'm 25 years old. I'll be 26 this year. I'm getting on, it feels like. But so I graduated from York University a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, which, if you're not from the UK, is up north in the UK. And I studied marketing there, and I've always been passionate about marketing. I grew up and I loved business and I loved creativity, and I loved how marketing sort of brought those two things together. So I studied marketing at York, and I spent a year working at BMW, working in their branding team, so trying to market cars and automotives, which was a really, really cool challenge. And I finished that. I went back to university, finished my studies, and I was like, yeah, this marketing thing is pretty cool. I think I like this. So I ended up then applying for copious amounts of different grad schemes, right? Marketing grad schemes. And I ended up at a company called Virgin Media O2. Again, very UK specific, but it's in the telecoms industry. So it helps with Wi-Fi, it brings 3G and mobile connectivity to you guys. So I joined Virgin as a marketeer, and I studied to become a chartered marketeer. But for me, I soon realized that the in-house marketing wasn't what it was cracked up to be for me. I felt like I was handing the fun part off to the agencies, right? So the agencies that do all the creative thinking and the brainstorming and the conceptualizing, for me, that was the really fun part. That was the creative part that attracted me to marketing. I sort of lost the passion for it a little bit. So I ended up moving into more managerial roles. I moved into the technology and the engineering department, and working through various different roles for various different people, ended up as working as a business manager for the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. So being a little bit of a jack of all trades, I guess, in that sense. And I was in the corporate sphere for, well, not that long, to be fair, 3 years. It felt like a long time to me because it was my whole sort of adult exposure, right? But I just felt like something was missing, and I burnt out a little bit, and it just forced me to be super reflective, because I loved the corporate world. I loved the people. I did like the work, but I felt like something was missing. And I realized what was missing was this creative thing, this thing that originally I was so passionate about that I lost and I sort of put on the back burner a little bit. And I think things that get put on the back burner never really go away. They're always there niggling somewhere. So I decided to take a bit of a bold step, and in December, resigned from my job. And I'm now trying to do various things in the sort of entrepreneurial, experimental snow globe that I'm existing in at the moment. And as this bottom bit says, I feel a little bit old. I feel super young, and I want to talk about this story. And if you guys on the call listening are also at university, you might be a little bit older, you might be a little bit younger. Share that journey with you in case there's any, as David says, little golden nuggets that you might be able to take away. And if we go right to the right-hand side of this slide, that's where I am at the moment, right? In this bit of an entrepreneurial aspect of my life, where I'm trying to pursue things that I'm passionate about, pursue things that I know that I can make a difference in, and create a life where I have creative freedom, right? And there's a few elements to that. There's a business I'm trying to build, which is around social media management and narrative creation for individuals, for personal brands, for companies, for other agencies. And alongside that, I'm trying to build out my personal brand as well. I think Alan and David are probably actually really, really great examples, right, of people who run personal brands. They are their own brand, right? They're their own business, and they get a lot of exposure and clientele that come through them just from being public figures, right? And then along the side, I'm also trying to go down this YouTube route and build a more of a fun brand where I can express a bit of a playful side.
If I may say so, Henry, to the audience generally, why not think about this little model that Henry's showing you a model here, isn't he? It's a really interesting model. We're not going to go through all the detail of it, but maybe if you're in a similar state of mind where you're not quite sure what you want to do next or where you're going, you might want to draw yourself a little model like that, just to figure out where you've been, where you are, and where you might want to go. It's very simple. There's nothing particularly complicated, but what he's got on that screen is very clear to me, and it helps him and it helps me understand where he might go next or where he could go next, and have a look at it after the event anyway, because you'll get the slides. Okay, Henry.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you guys are going through that stage of university or whatever it is, we're trying to figure out where you want to go next. This is probably the most basic advice anyone's ever going to give you, but I think it's important is just to actually take the time to be reflective. I think so many people get caught up in being busy in terms of applying for jobs, getting their studies done, actually working in a job, whatever it might be, that not many people actually take the time to step back and be reflective. And before I, you know, handed in my resignation or whatever, I probably spent 3 weekends worth I blocked out of just me sitting in a coffee shop being reflective. And that was really powerful to figure out where you want to go and the things that are actually important for you and the things that you're actually passionate about, which for me was these 3 things I realized. And the things that and these are an amalgamation of things that I've taken from uni, I've taken from the corporate world, I've taken from my personal experience. These are the 3 areas that I've come to the conclusion that I really love and I'm really passionate about. Storytelling, creativity, and human psychology. And we'll touch upon them briefly, chronologically. Storytelling, it probably sounds like a really naff thing to be passionate around, right? It's probably like, when I say storytelling, the first thought that comes to your head is probably Once Upon a Time or a book that you read growing up as a kid. If anyone's got a favorite book or a favorite story, by the way, it'd be great to hear what that is in the comments. If you could just post it in there. A favorite book, something you read as a kid, something that told you a story. But I think that storytelling is, well, I know that storytelling is so much more powerful than this, right? I mean, I'd go as far to say that storytelling is the one thing that almost underpins everything that we do as humans, right? Our relationships, our interactions, every reel that we see on Instagram, they're all telling stories in different ways. And when I was putting the slide together, I was thinking a little bit about the history of storytelling. I was like, who told the first story? And I think I came to the conclusion that as humans, as a species, we've been telling stories ever since we could communicate, right? I mean, the earliest cave paintings date back 30,000 years ago. And they're stories, right? We might not be being chased by dinosaurs now, and their vocabulary might have been a bit more rudimentary than ours is at the moment, but they're still telling stories, and they're stories through images that we can understand 30,000 years later. I mean, how powerful is that, right? A cave painting that happened 30,000 years ago, we can still understand now. I just think that's awesome. And what I realize is that we're telling stories every single day, right? When you go to the pub with your mates, or you go for a coffee with your mates, you're telling stories. When you tell someone about your day, you're telling a story. When you tell a first date about your first kiss, you're telling a story, right? And I think in a world of social media, telling or learning how to tell compelling stories that cut through the noise and really resonate with people at an emotional level is super powerful. And that really helps you, which we'll get onto, turn a loyal audience into an engaged audience. And you guys might have some questions on this next slide, David and Alan, but I love using this slide as an example for storytelling. This is a 1 penny coin, right? It's literally worth 1 pence, which is, for you guys not in England, it's the sort of lowest currency, right, that we have. It's literally worth a penny, right? You see it on the ground, you probably walk over it. It's not worth picking it up. There's no value that it has above it. It's literally 1 pence. Until we have I think it's an Irish rhyme, right? Where we say, you find a penny, you pick it up, and all day long you'll have good luck. And adding that story, adding that narrative to what really is inherently quite a mundane thing, quite a worthless thing that you wouldn't pick up, turns it into something that is suddenly intrinsically worth so much more. It's something you'll pick up, you'll take home, you might give to your kids at home, and they might keep it as a keepsake for the rest of their life, right? But that's a story. That's applying a story to something that is pretty, as I say, it's pretty mundane, which then turns it into something so much bigger and so much more powerful. I really like that example.
That's a great example, Henry. A great example. I've got a young daughter, 8 years old, and that exact thing happens. I mean, she does understand the value of currency now. She's learned about it, but she's not picking it up because it's a 1p. She's picking it up because we've told her it's good luck. So exactly that story that you've told, we've told to our children, and they react based on that. So I think I love the slide as well. It really makes it pop and resonate with us.
I appreciate that. Cool. I'll move on to the next one then. But then, so my talk was more around personal brand, right? So how does this connect to personal brand? And touched upon it a little bit in terms of telling a compelling story, right, that connects with someone emotionally is really important. And when I've been thinking about personal brand recently, I've been thinking about these 4 different things. And I just wanted to touch upon them a little bit. And we can go into more detail about any of these if you pop your questions in the chat, guys. But I think a lot of people, when you talk about posting online, everyone's like, you should be really niche. You should be really niche and hyper focus on one thing, because then you get a really loyal audience about that one thing. But I really disagree with this. I think as humans, we all live really multifaceted lives, right? We have so many different interests across such a broad field, and everyone's like that, right? And maybe there are topics that you talk about more and you talk about in more detail because you're more passionate about them. I might do a lot of stock investing, and I might talk about that more, but simply because I'm really interested in it. But keeping it broad and having a personal brand that really shows all of who you are, which is going to be multifaceted, I think is super important. Because that's truly who you are. You're not holding anything back, and you're being authentic, which I sort of skipped on to point 4 there. You're being authentic and you're being genuine, which ultimately people see through someone, right, online if they're not. And being experimental links into that a little bit more. As you're pushing out this broad array of different posts, some are going to stick and some aren't going to stick, and that's fine. I think David I know you post a lot on LinkedIn. I'm sure some posts go down a lot better than others, right? There's no magic formula necessarily to it. And once you find out what sticks, you double down on it. But always you should be experimenting, right? I think I don't know if you stick by this rule, David, but in my head, about 80% of what you post it should be stuff that you know is going to work. And always, even if you've got 10 million followers, you should be posting for 20% new stuff because it might work even better, right?
And I'm a great lover of LinkedIn, and I do use other social platforms to kind of read, but don't necessarily engage too well on those. I like LinkedIn because it's kind of that professional type platform. But I totally agree with you. I could sit there and talk about just me and my business, but that's not real life. People want to know a little bit more about an individual and what they get up to and what they're doing and stuff like that. And I know people say LinkedIn is not the place to go and share about your dog and your cat and their family, because they say it's a professional. But people buy people at the end of the day, and people want to know what's behind that image or that video, not just, oh, you're an expert at X, i.e., digital marketing or branding. What makes you tick? What makes you you? And that is the power of storytelling. We can tell that by using stories or antidotes, whatever that's going to be, to kind of share with our audience. So I love this fact that you're saying, let's share more about who we are and what we do and why we do it.
And it comes down to trust, right, as well. Because if you're selling yourself and you're selling products through yourself, if people see all these different elements of your life and realize that you are human, which of course you are, then they're going to trust you more, right? And when someone trusts you, they're more inclined to purchase more and interact with you more and be loyal and stick around and spread your message for you, which ultimately is one of the most powerful things.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Sorry.
You mentioned the word trust 4 times. And I hear whole conversations where trust is never mentioned or thought about. And that is absolutely terrible. And in life, whether you're in business, whether you're in research, whether you're in teaching, Trust, in other words, being believed in and trusted generally is so, so important. So I'm so pleased you mentioned that.
Yeah, no, it's the most important thing, right? It's hard to build, but it's easy to lose. I think I always try to remember. And there's a good quote from, while we're on personal brand, there's a good quote from Jeff Bezos I read this morning actually, and someone asked him what personal brand was, and he said it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I just thought that was really powerful. It's what do you want to be known for, right?
Yeah.
What message do you want people to spread for you on your behalf? How do you want people to describe you? And the last little bit on this slide about quality or quantity, I feel like this is the $1 million question when it comes to posting online and building a personal brand online. Do I do 2 posts a week that are cinematic and flashy and you know really, really high quality, or do I just churn out a ton of content? Part of this comes with trial or error. I think there's a happy medium in the middle that combines the two. I'm not saying post 7 things a week that are all really, really high quality. I think that's you need to be Gary Vee and have a £1 million production team behind you to do that sort of stuff. But I do think there's a happy medium between the two. And there are, if anyone on this call is starting to build a personal brand online, there are certain techniques and methods and things that you guys can use that might help with that. I'm going to put in the chat, there's a technique called waterfall content, right? And the whole premise about waterfall content is we have this one overarching thing that we then split up into lots of different parts and distill across different channels. So that might be focusing on one specific topic for a week and writing a really cool article about it, and then cutting that article up into different posts and different snippets and different podcasts, and that helps helps with the quantity aspect, right? And the quality aspect is obviously going to be good because you guys are creating it.
What would you recommend, Henry? Someone's starting out, maybe in business, maybe they just want to build a personal brand for themselves. What would you recommend they do? We could drill down, do they choose a platform of choice, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram? And again, that might be based on the market they're trying to communicate with, which is what I would always say. Work out who the audience is first before you go and choose a platform of choice. But how can they start out? Maybe a post, a video, a story. What would be your suggestion to get someone going?
I think you've just got to post, because I think for a lot of people who haven't started yet, it's pretty intimidating, right? To set a camera up, set a tripod up, talk to a camera, and put yourself out into the world, worried what your friends will think, your relatives will think, all of that stuff. It's going to be racing through your mind, and I don't think you're human if it's not. I think the first step is just to do it, which might sound like a silly step, but it's a step that gradually over time, and not even that much time, you become a lot more comfortable with. The thing that I've been thinking about as well recently is people talk about setting up a business and people talk about personal brand, but they seem to be when people talk about them, I feel they seem to be discussed very differently. But I think applying very much a business mindset to your personal brand, and this should almost be running the same way. And what I mean by that is you're creating a business, right? You're going to have a brand strategy. You're going to have a mission statement. You're going to know who your competitors are. You're going to have a tone of voice. You're going to have all these things that identify you as a brand to the world, right? So why not think about it in the same way for your personal brand, right? Because why are you creating a personal brand? What's your personal mission? What's the purpose of you creating all these videos and putting all this content out there? What tone of voice do you want? Are you trying to attract a certain type of audience, bankers, senior executives? Do you want to be more professional, or do you want to have a more playful tone of voice to speak to young professionals or people at university just about to enter the career? So I think, almost going online and finding a really a super basic, nothing complicated, super basic business plan template and change it. It might not all be relevant. It's probably a really good starting point, right? Just to write down and get on paper what those statements are, what your purpose is, what your mission is, where you want to take it, and why. I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree.
And you say there, be experimental. Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Alan.
You say there, be experimental too. Think openly, think experimentally,
Yeah.
You're saying, Henry. And be prepared to grow and change and modify. And always, I would say, be aware that there's an audience out there, and you said it in a way yourself. Different kinds of people have different kinds of interests, and if you want to really address an audience, you've got to understand what their particular interests are. And it's one of the things I run up against all the time with young people who have started companies and are trying to raise money. And they may be brilliant technically, but unless they think through the investor audience they have to convince to give them money and the interest of the investor audience, which are very different than their own, then they might very well miss the boat and not present themselves and their personality and their being in the way that captures the interest of the listener, who is the investor who's going to give them the money. So it's very, very important. Authenticity and creativity. I like those words, Henry.
Yeah, and it's I'm gonna interview the interviewers, I think, for a second. And Alan, I'll ask you a question, because I think you touched upon it at the start, right? You said, "Oh, I believe in a world without borders," but you obviously, you know, been your own man in the sense that you've been employed and you've been doing various things individually for the last 20, 30 years. Sorry if those numbers are wrong. But what's your purpose? If I ask you that question, Alan, what would you say your purpose is, your mission?
My main interest and my big purpose at the moment is to support the next generation, not only my own grandchildren, of which I've got 8. You know, you're the eldest male member of that team, and I've got a great grandson. But I really feel if I can make a contribution that enables the next generation to handle this awkward and difficult world better than our lot have done, against all the odds, probably, then I will have made a contribution. So I'm constantly surrounded largely by younger people than me and trying very hard. No, I'm not teaching. I'm enabling and opening minds, I hope, to enable people to do what you're doing, to find their way in life. I think university education in particular isn't about learning factual things. It's about preparing for life. It's part of the preparation for life's journey. So that's really where I'm thinking a lot of my time, thinking ahead, thinking and trying to keep up with the way the world's changing to enable other people in the next groups of generations, really, to do what will be good for them and good for the world. Anyway, keep going,
Amazing.
Henry, because we don't want to run out
all
of
good.
time. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I get caught up chatting sometimes. And the next thing I want to talk about, this is true. The next passion area I wanted to speak about was around creativity, which I know is a super broad thing, creativity, right? And creativity gets a lot of stick, I think. So that first line there says, "I don't buy that someone just isn't creative." Do I have any backing for this? Not hugely yet, but I don't believe that someone fundamentally isn't creative, right? I like to believe that we are all inherently born really creative, and creativity means different things for someone else. And just because you can't compose a song, or you can only draw a stick man, you can't draw some crazy big picture, it doesn't mean you're not creative. That's like a very general definition of creativity. Can you draw? Are you musical? That's sort of what we learn in school, right? And I think as we go through school and we maybe don't fit into one of those categories, we create this mental block around creativity, and we just define ourselves. No one's ever told us we're uncreative, right? We just define ourselves as being uncreative, and I hate that. So either put it in the chat, guys, or just think to yourself. I would love to know, well, in the chat, if possible, I would love to know if you think you're a creative person.
Yeah,
David,
I mean,
would you say you are?
David knows one of my favorite quotations. You know this, Henry, and David knows it. Einstein said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world." And I'm not a classical scholar, but there was a particular philosopher called Socrates, who some of you will have heard of, and he said this: education should be about kindling the flame, not filling the vessel. In other words, you know, you're not really in an educational setting just to cram your head with facts. You really want to tap into that creativity and that imagination that's somewhere in there, even if it might be a bit sleepy. And as you say, Henry, it needs stimulating.
It does completely. Yeah. And I think it's creativity is a muscle, right? I believe it's a muscle, and I think it's something that we can train. Some people, okay, might have access to that muscle a little bit easier. They might inherently be a little bit more creative, but I think it's a muscle that every single person can train and should train. I think that there's a really interesting study. I can't remember who it was by. This guy went into a school, right? And he said to a class of 7-year-olds, who wants to draw me a picture, anything? And the whole class put their hand up. Then he went to a class of 15-year-olds, asked the same question, and maybe 5 people put their hand up. Into a class of 18-year-olds, asked the same question, and nobody put their hand up. And I think that's really telling, right? It's a skill that we need to keep doing and keep practicing and keep training. Why is this important for personal brand? I think going back to what we said earlier about using a sort of business plan format, right, to try and understand what your mission is, what your purpose is, what value are you bringing to the world, what's your ultimate goal, and what the outcome is. That's quite a creative process, right? You can't just sit down and necessarily write that out. You have to be a little bit creative with it, and you have to tease it out, and you have to almost play games with yourself to understand what that is. So I can see some comments coming in. Christina, sounds like you're a super creative person. And Grace, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think being around creative people inspires creativity, right? Being around like-minded people fosters a certain type of innovation and feeling, and you bounce ideas off of each other, right? Some people are creative very much best with their own thoughts when they're in a dark, quiet room, and some people love bouncing ideas off each other. And it's so important.
And Henry, we need to be flexible, don't we? Because there was a great management trainee, he's no longer with us, I'm afraid, in America, Joseph Campbell, and he said this. He said, we may have to give up the life we have planned to take up the life that is waiting for us. In other words, unless you are constantly creative and open-minded and thinking in a very forward-looking way about what you might do and might be, then you may miss the opportunity to be something very special. I spent my youth really wanting to be a doctor, and I ended up in venture capital. I don't know how I got there, but it was all to do with what you're talking about, enabling my personal brand to develop and change as I learned more about life and other people. And I learned everything I've learned really from other people, not from myself or books. Keep going, Henry.
Yeah, what's very interesting, just to jump in, Henry, and I totally get this. What Grace said, being around other like-minded, creative minds is inspiring. So we have this thing that was called the pandemic, and it made us all work from home. And there's lots of people that still want to remain and work from home. And if you're in that creative industry, so I'm going to ask you for an opinion on this, Henry. If you're in that creative industry, are you better off, stay working from home and jumping on a Teams call and having a bit of a chat with somebody? Or is it time to get back in the office, to get round, that table in a creative mindset with other people and bounce ideas around and, jot something down, sing something out? I don't know what it is, but surely being together, working together is much more lucrative and creates much more creative outcomes than sitting working from home.
I couldn't agree. I love working with people. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's important to understand as an employer, as a company, as a team leader, as a manager, whatever you guys might be on the call. I think it's so important to understand what kind of thinkers the people are on your team, right? Because there are some people that, as David said, work really well in person. There are some people that need a bit of alone time first to conceptualize their ideas, that then present them to a group of people, and suddenly they go when something great comes out of it. And there are also reflective thinkers who might be quiet during that period of collaborative brainstorming, and then they have a shower, and the next morning they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is a great idea. So I think working in person for me is amazing, and for everyone it fosters a special environment. There's a buzz around it, but giving people the time also to have that solitude probably isn't the right word, but to have that independent thinking either side of that creativity is, for me, the way that I would go about it if I was, I don't know, leading a team or thinking about it in that sort of space.
So if it's your business and you had a team of people, you would be pretty much insisting that they need to be in the office, working together, supporting each other, and getting outside of the box to think creativity, because it's going to be a lot easier to do that than if they were sitting at home and working for a
100%.
screen.
Oh, 100%.
I love it.
And then giving them time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Giving them time
signed
to
up.
think about it. Yeah, nice. I'm glad you agree. And my next slide, this is what one of these blokes was saying. Sorry,
yeah, please. Carry on.
Oh, sorry, you were going to shunt me along. These are a few quotes of creativity that I really love. And I guess, David, what you were just saying, John Cleese, in the middle, he sort of hints upon that, right? He says, if you want creative workers, then give them enough time to play. And what he means, I think, by enough time to play is enough time to not actually do work, but to think and to conceptualize and to come up with ideas, because ultimately that's what creates innovation and that's what creates real change. And this sort of, I just like to slip the slide in because it sort of summarizes what we were just talking about, right? So Ken Robinson on the left says, for him, it's just as important, creativity is as important as literacy, right? It's something that should be treated the same, as in it's something that should be taught, something that should be trained, and we show people how to do it. Brené Brown says there's no innovation and creativity without failure. It's a process, right? And you can't be afraid to fail. And when you play, you will fail, and will have ideas that don't work, and that's part of the process. And then on the right, I really love this one. She says you can't use up creativity. The more you have, the more you use, the more you have. And that sort of touches upon, Grace, what you were saying. It's sort of once you get into this creative mindset, it snowballs, right? And you bounce ideas around, and it just extrapolates and keeps getting more beneficial. I'm going to skip past this next one quickly because we're running out of time. But I wanted to do a really, really quick exercise, literally 2 or 3 minutes maximum, to help us loosen up a little bit, feel a little bit innovative, but also maybe start to feel a little bit creative again. Christina and Grace, I know you guys seem like really creative people, but there might also be some people on the call that would describe themselves as not creative people. And that's fine. But I wanted to take you through an exercise that might start to tease you out of that thought process a little bit and show you that you actually can be super creative, right? So there's this exercise that I've been doing, not every day, but I've been doing regularly just for 5 minutes in a very playful way that's started to help me be more creative again. And it's this thing called product deconstruction, right? And it's what they use at Yeezys. So if you guys, Yeezy shoes, Yeezy fashion, it's the process that a lot of Kanye West and a lot of the creative designers at Yeezy go through when they're conceptualizing different products. And it can literally take 5 minutes in the morning before you start work, or if you need to get into a creative mindset. I've been using this to sort of help me get into that flow state. And essentially, all you do is you pick an item, for example, this water bottle, literally anything on your desk. If you guys are sitting now, pick a random item up, and you deconstruct that item into lots of different parts, right? So if I'm looking at this water bottle, I've got the vessel, the bit that holds the water, I've got the lid, I've got the cap, and I've got the nozzle. So there's 4 parts to this water bottle, and I've listed them all down on a piece of paper. Sorry, I just spilled water everywhere. I would then use each one of those parts, and I would conceptualize different uses for each one of those parts, right? So I might say, the bottle bit could be made of cushioned material, so it doesn't make a huge noise when it falls over. Or the nozzle could be like your AirPods, and you could take it off and detach it for a bigger one or a smaller one, depending on how big your mouth is. And you sort of go through, you deconstruct the product, and you go through each element and conceptualize a new use or a new version of what that could be, and then you put it all back together, and you have a totally new product that didn't exist before. And that's what Yeezy, for example, have been doing with their shoes. They construct them so you have the tongue, the laces, the sole, the whatever else you have in a shoe, and you replace each part with something else, a different material or a different use, and you put the shoe back together, and you've suddenly got this really innovative thing that never existed before.
Brilliant. That's brilliant.
It's cool, isn't it? It's cool.
Yeah, I think that's a great little exercise. We can get everyone doing this, and let's see if people want to share. I do a very similar one. I'm talking about presenting and speaking, where we get people to come up who are a little bit nervous, a little bit shy about presenting, and we come up, and it's a bit like, whose line is it anyway? You might be too young to remember it, Henry, but they get given a product and they have to stand up and then literally talk about it. But they're not allowed to tell us what it is. So if they pick up a cup, they can't say, well, it's a cup. They've got to come up with a new way of using it. So, that cup could be turned into something totally different. Similar principle, but it's to get the creative juices flowing and, more importantly, to get them communicating. And even though they come out with a lot of twaddle and it doesn't, what they're talking about, it's inventive, it's innovation. But I love this. This is great. Can I steal this? Can I borrow this?
Yeah. Well, take it up with Kanye West, not me.
No, I will have to use this. I think it's a really good exercise.
Yeah, no, please do. And it might not create a world. I'm sure what I just created here is not a world-changing product. I don't think Yeezy are going to give me a job anytime soon, but it just helps you get into a different mindset, right? And I guess in the last little slide was just to talk about this one on the right, which I literally will spend 10 seconds on, around human psychology, right? And for me, I'm just really passionate about understanding people, right? Understanding why we do what we do, why we don't do things, why we make certain decisions, why we don't make certain decisions. And the reason I left this on here is when we think about personal brand, it's a form of marketing, right? We're marketing ourselves, and we need to understand what our audience will enjoy, what they won't enjoy, what will resonate with them, what emotions will resonate with them, what pain points might our audience have that we share, what are the commonalities that we can touch upon and communicate in a way that will resonate with them and build engagement and build loyalty. So it's just something I'm very interested about to understand and how you actually grab hold of someone's attention and keep their attention and turning, because there's a big difference between a following and an audience, right? So a following, you can have 100K followers on Instagram, whatever it is, doesn't really mean anything. But if you have 100,000 people who are in an audience that listens, an audience that engages, that buys, that comments, then that's a pretty powerful thing. And there's a cool theory. I don't know what it's called. I'm going to call it theory of 1,000, where it says that you only need 1,000 true fans to make a living, right? And what that means is that you might have an Instagram account, as we say, with 100K, but you haven't monetized that. No one really cares what you're saying. They just follow you. But if you have an Instagram account with 1,000 people who love you, they love what you do, they buy into everything that you do, they buy your merch, they attend your concerts, whatever it is, that is so much more beneficial than having 100,000 followers. So I think if you're starting to build a brand, don't worry that you don't have a huge influencer following. I think being the way the market is now, having a genuine, authentic presence with a smaller following is going to attract more people. It's better in the long run. It's better for brand sponsorship. It's all that sort of stuff. So understanding your audience, understanding people, I'm really passionate about. And I think it's important to spend some time thinking about that when you start creating content. But that's
Henry,
that's all the slides I had.
Give us your reflection though, and after what you've just said on influencers. I keep reading about influencers, people whose whole profession is as an influencer. Are you an influencer, or do you believe that influencers are worth what they get paid for, or it's just an interesting subject to me to be an influencer? I keep reading about them.
Yeah, am I an influencer? No, is the answer. Would I like to be an influencer? I probably wouldn't mind to be an influencer. I mean, I haven't thought about your question in terms of, is there a difference between a personal brand, between having a personal brand and being an influencer? I don't know. What do you think, David? Is there?
Yeah, that's really what was behind my question.
I just sort of where I thought you were going.
Do they have to have a big personal brand to be an influencer?
Well, I'd look at it as a different brand the other way, actually. I think we can all have a personal brand. We could be running a micro business, selling chocolate bars in our local area, or a small coffee shop, and we build a personal brand around us or around that business. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be an influencer to the rest of the world. Of course, there's people that strive to be, a next YouTube influencer and get big numbers. And I will say, numbers are a vanity thing, aren't they? Those are like, I want thousands, I want millions of people to follow me. Well, that's a vanity thing. Because as you said, Henry, we can have 1 million followers, but if people are not, at the end of the day, buying what we've got, what does that really mean? What does it really come down to? And I suppose it depends if you're trying to monetize it, because some might be doing it just to spread good news, maybe bad news as well. So for me, I think everybody can build a personal brand. How they want to utilize that, I think, will be different for all of us. Some will say, well, I want to build success. Well, what's success? That's subjective. It's different for me to what it is to both of you and to probably all our listeners and viewers. So everybody should build a personal brand around them. Whether you want to become a global influencer is a very different thing. And let's be honest, we're not all going to become that. Most of us won't want to be that either.
Yeah, no, it's true. And
I mean,
think...
Henry, go on, carry on.
No, please go for it. I'll ask your question. Sorry, I'll come in a sec.
No, Henry, what I was
all good. Sorry,
I'm
sorry, there's a bit of lag. I'll stop talking and you proceed.
No, don't stop talking. This last bit of discussion, I mean, you have told us that at the age of 25, as a high quality graduate working for a great company in a managerial position, pretty well paid, you've sprung loose. You've resigned. You're on the loose. And you've told us a lot about what you're trying to do to create a personal brand. But I actually happen to know also that you've got a plan to travel a lot. You want to see a lot more of the world. And I think you ought to tell us a little bit about why and how. I mean, Henry did spend some time in China when I think he was 19 or 20. And I think he had a great time in China and he learned an awful lot and came back with a different view of the world and culture. But you've got this in your head now, Henry, because you keep talking about it. And you've been talking about places like Indonesia and Cambodia. So say a little bit about that, because you have a restlessness about you at the moment that I feel every time I talk to you.
I do feel a little bit restless. Yeah, it's I like the analogy of breaking free. I guess you could say that. But yeah, I mean, so I'm in what, actually about a week and a half time, I'm spending some time traveling right before. So I've resigned, as Alan says, and I'm setting up my own things in the background. But before I wanted to do that, I wanted to spend some time traveling for two reasons. One for leisure. I never took a gap year. I never really experienced those things, and I really want to. And two, because of this sort of this human psychology element that we spoke about. I want to understand how different cultures think about business, how different cultures operate, how different startup cultures happen. And I want to meet people and build a bit of a network across the world, right? And the best way to do that is in person, getting out there, meeting people, socializing with people in those spheres, in the startup spheres, people who are like-minded. And having a personal brand has been, not that I've just started building mine, not that it's this huge thing, but starting to post online has already connected me to maybe, it doesn't sound like much, right? 5 or 6 people out in Singapore and Indonesia as two examples who are in a similar path to me, right? Who have just also quit their jobs. I've never met them before, right? They're also just starting their own businesses, online businesses. And when I fly out and do some traveling, we're going to spend some time together, and we're going to meet up and talk about goals and talk about things that we can both resonate with, right? Which I think is really powerful. If I had never started posting, right, then I would have never have met these people and built my network in the way that I'm trying to.
So Henry, you're going to map.
And you've already bought your. Yeah.
We do have a bit of a delay for some reason. We do have a bit of a delay for some reason coming on the feeds. But so Henry, are you going to map your journey? Are you going to be sharing, not daily, because obviously you're going to be probably in the outback at certain times and stuff like that, but you're going to share kind of what that journey looks like, your travel, the people you're meeting, the conversations you're having, the food that you might be dining, the adventures that you get up to? Are we going to see that on social media? Because if we are, I'm going to tell everybody to follow you, because we want to see what it looks like.
100%. I will very much be doing that. Yeah, I'll be doing that on my Instagram primarily. I think it's something another thing I've been thinking about with personal brand is that. So we said we all live these very broad, multifaceted lives, right? But I think and this isn't a bad thing. What you're going through most probably isn't unique, right? And there will be a huge portion of people who resonate with that. just from my experience, right, I know that there'll be other people who are 25 and feel a bit stuck in the corporate world, and this isn't what I wanted to do when I went into uni, and now I'm in this weird place, but maybe I don't have the courage or the finances or whatever it is to quit and start my own business. But also, if you're later in life and you're pulled out of the corporate world when you're 50 or when you're 30 or whatever it is, there'll also be people who are feeling the same way, right? So yes, I will be posting it on Instagram. And you guys are more than happy to follow. I'm more than happy for you guys to follow along and be part of that journey if you're also feeling the same way.
And you've already bought
Let's
your
connect,
first
for
ticket,
sure.
haven't you, Henry? You
I have
know
done
where
a
you're
one-way
going
ticket.
first. You might not know where you're going second because it's an open book, isn't it? And maybe as a result of the day, you'll get some invitations to meet people in other parts of the world if they feel they'd like to extend an invitation.
Yeah,
to
that would
track
be awesome.
your journey. It's very, very, very. It would be
Yeah.
very, very interesting.
Reach out to
Henry.
me on LinkedIn
And
or
after
Instagram,
that,
guys. It would be awesome.
Yeah, so put in
And
the
after
chat,
that,
Henry,
it's yeah.
in the chat. Let
All right,
them
shall
know
we got some
how
questions,
we
David?
can find you, how we can follow you, where you are on Instagram and LinkedIn. Share that with us, because then everybody can kind of connect, and we can follow that exciting journey as it unravels for you.
Amazing.
When is your plane leaving the tarmac of England and heading away? When is your planned date to leave?
3rd of March. So a couple of
3rd
weeks
of
from
March.
now.
Oh,
Being
the clock
very
is
real.
ticking.
I know. How exciting. How exciting.
We're coming quite close to closing. There's no more questions, but I will just say, if anyone's got any questions, pop it into the chat. We'll see if we can take a few of those before we finish. Of course, reach out, connect with Henry on those social platforms. You can keep asking him questions. He's going to have plenty of time when he's sitting on the beach with his feet up, sipping on his cocktail to answer a question or two. So, yeah, please keep in contact. We look forward to following that journey, Henry. Alan, as he is your grandson, and not number one grandson, number one being oldest but not favourite, because you can't have favourites. That's not allowed. And if you do, Alan, you're not allowed to tell us, of course, anyway. But I'm going to leave it to you, Alan, to kind of wrap up this afternoon. So I think it's only fair for you to thank Henry for joining us.
Yeah, I mean, Henry, I'd like to say also thank you to you for all you've done in the past 2 or 3 years for our Latvia Venture Camp. And Henry's been giving very intriguing talks about social network marketing. And that's a very interesting topic. And it's a very great love of yours, isn't it, Henry? I mean, that's what you've been doing for a long time. Tell them where your first destination is before we wrap up. Where will the first aeroplane take you?
Thailand is my first destination.
Thailand. Yeah.
One-way flight out, and then working my way down through Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and up into Vietnam to finish. I think a bit of a U shape on the map.
Yeah. Yeah, I've introduced him, by the way, to a lady that I've worked with. Oh, David knows as well, because she's appeared on one of his broadcasts, who had a very comfortable life in Westminster as a very senior secretary in the Houses of Parliament. But she had become very, very interested and concerned about Cambodia. She'd been to Cambodia for holidays, and she'd seen the devastation wrought by the Khmer Rouge, where millions of people were killed. And she had this restlessness to give up her secretarial job and go to Cambodia and do something to help the next generation of people. And what she did was she raised some money, and we helped her do that. And she went to Cambodia and she started an organization, a little company called, it was a cafe business. So she started a cafe, and she hired people and trained them how to run cafes, and then let them run the cafe, and moved on and trained a whole load of other people to train them how to start restaurants and cafes. It was called Footprints Cafe. It won an award, and she raised a lot of charitable money to make it happen. And just one other example of someone that went to school with my eldest daughter, Henry's auntie, in Cambridge. She got to Oxford and got a degree in law, became a consultant, earning a lot of money, and was very, very restless about something extraordinary that she'd wanted to do, which was single-handedly row the three great oceans of the world. Her name's Rolf Savage. And off she went, and she gave up her well-paid consultancy job, and literally she rowed the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean in that order for a number of years. Now she's involved in helping environmental businesses. So, you know, what I said about Joseph Campbell, you may have to give up the life that we've planned and take up the life that's waiting for us. And I wonder, Henry, as you travel, what you're going to learn that will cause you to take up the life that's waiting for you. Because at the moment, you certainly don't, you've made it very clear you don't want to continue with Virgin Media or just the kind of online marketing in a big corporation that you were part of. And you've got this nagging thing about having your own business, haven't you? You're still going to seek that, yes?
Without a shadow of a doubt, yeah. I think part of the excitement for me, part of the excitement, but also nervousness is a little bit of that ambiguity, right? It's exciting. It's a bit nerve-wracking to not have an income anymore, right, for a little point in time, but it's exciting to not know who you're going to meet. And it's exciting to know that you've got all these passionate areas and things, but it's exciting to not know which one is going to be the one that you follow necessarily. But yeah, very much so. So I'm looking to start an online business, an online agency, primarily in narrative creation for blockchain companies, actually helping them define who they are and how they communicate that in a way that resonates to people. But also social media management for companies a bit more generally.
I'd also say to any oldies that are out there listening to this, because I'm an oldie, that one of the great pleasures in my life, and I know my wife Pamela would say the same, is the relationship we've been able to have with our wonderful grandchildren. And I hope that we've been encouraging rather than restricting. Yes, we do offer severe advice at times, like if they're running along the edge of a cliff, we do try and deter them from doing stuff like that. But generally speaking, I hope Henry would tell you that he's been encouraged. And as some of you grow older and you become parents and grandparents, have a lot of thought about what it is you might do best by the next generation, by encouraging, supporting, nurturing, but not getting in the way when they have crazy ideas and throwing your hands up and saying, don't do that or that will never work. You know, why not, people don't change the world, do they really? Why not? Why not? Why not people? Why not people do change the world? But yes, but people don't change the world. Try and be a why not person rather than the yes but person, because I think that's what Henry is. He's not yes but, he's why not. And his two brothers are pretty well the same as well. And that's a great word of compliment to his mum and dad, because they have been people that have enabled rather than restricted. So it's been great, Henry, to hear I've heard more of your story than you told me before today. So, and your grandma is listening somewhere in the other room. I hope she's enjoyed you too. And it's been great having you. And it's very interesting. This is the third, David and I, this is the third event of its kind that we've done. And they're all different. And we hope that those of you that have joined us for the first time will come again it's about a month's time. I think it's the 19th again, David, isn't it?
So our next one, yes, is next month on Wednesday, the 19th, but it's at an earlier time because we've decided to bring it forward by a couple of hours till 12 o'clock UK time to allow those friends over in the East, China, to actually be able to watch this at a reasonable time in their dinner rather than going to bed. So, yeah, slightly earlier time of 12 o'clock lunchtime, midday UK time, 19th of March. And we look forward to it. It's going to be another super exciting two guests joining us, Alan, in our next episode. So we look forward to welcoming them.
Yeah, next time we're doing something to do with sustainability and environmental social governance, aren't we?
We are, yeah. So measuring and monitoring sustainable performance and ESG, and that's with Connor and Natalia. So yeah, we look really forward to welcoming them and learning more about. Well, for me, this is a learning curve. Every time I meet a fantastic guest, I learn something new, and I've learned something new today. And I hope all our guests have learned something as well. I think it gives us the point of Alan of it's dead on 3 o'clock here in the afternoon in the UK to finally thank Henry and wish him all the best on his journey that kicks off in 10 days time. Safe travels. Do check in. Do follow Henry on his social channel. Do check in. Henry, I'm sure you're going to end up being a digital nomad while you're out there, traveling, meeting fantastic people, probably finding maybe a co-founder for your business or something along those lines as well. So we certainly wish you all the best and all the luck with that.
And before we close, let me say to two friends who I know are there from Beijing, Echo and Junior, they came here. They took the opportunity to come to the UK and attend an event. They answered the call to adventure. They did what you did. They came here. And since that time, which is probably more than a year ago now, I've been in touch with them and talking to them, and they've had enormous new ideas. They've done a lot of creative thinking, and they've really followed the pathway that you were suggesting people would follow. And I'm so pleased for you two in Beijing that we'll be doing it a bit earlier next time, so you won't have to stay up half the night to hear us. So thank you all so much. And thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
For a great broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you all. See you again. See you in a month's time. Bye-bye.
Catch you soon.
Bye.